Hey everyone, welcome back to the arena. I'm MD, joined here by Covey, and once again, awesome special guest that we can't wait to get into. Love and appreciation first and foremost to those that continue to follow and show support.
What's up, guys? Like MD said, we've got another guest here who actually flew in, not just for this. I wish it was just for this podcast, but he's got some friends here in Chicago. This is Teddy. Is it Sourlis?
Sourlis.
Is that Greek?
It is 100%.
Two Greek fellas. I love
Yes,
it.
sir.
Teddy is from New York, but he's a founder of Men's X Mental, which is a nonprofit org striving to break down the barriers and stigmas surrounding the mental health of male athletes. So, resonates very deeply with me as someone who struggled with their mental health, who was an athlete, who probably struggled with their mental health because he was an athlete in the environment he was in. So, super excited to have this conversation. But without further ado, Teddy, why don't you just provide an overview of kind of who you are and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you both for having me. It's awesome. Chicago's a great city. I love New York, but we'll rock with Chicago. So, yeah, I was born and raised in New Jersey, actually. Recently, last year, just graduated from Babson College, where I played college basketball for 4 years. And in that time span, I lost a couple friends, and during COVID specifically, it really just changed my entire perspective and outlook on life. I dealt with my own mental health struggles, and being a male athlete specifically, it's not a typical conversation that we have. It's not normal to say, hey man, hey buddy, I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z because of this. So I looked at my teammates, and those men were my saving grace. Those were the guys who saved my life. And after losing friends that I had loved, I recognized the impact that they had on my life, and to be able to sit here today and be in this chair is a blessing, because I woke up many days not expecting to wake up. It's been a hell of a journey.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of ultimately drove you to start the nonprofit? Because it's one thing to be passionate about mental health. It's another to start a nonprofit around it. So what kind of, I mean, I'm sure some of the drive was from what you just said, just the pain of losing friends and going through your own mental health battle, but what kind of drove you to ultimately start it?
Actually, it was a class project. So Babson College is all centered around entrepreneurship, and it's been the number one entrepreneurship school for almost 30 years. But in one of the classes, it was an IT project where essentially you had to create a social media platform for a grade, and it was supposed to be shut down at the end of the class. I didn't follow directions. I don't follow directions very well. So I kept it running. Me and a couple other athletes, we were like, we're going to bring awareness to this. Obviously, I had a predisposition to knowing what that looks like and how it can affect men. But it was a platform that all of a sudden started taking off after COVID, and I really ran with it, and I believe my calling was to save people and to help people and to bring light to something like this. So I just ran with it, created the branding, got everything trademarked, and gratefully we're here today. It's where it's grown.
So, it sounds like you had firsthand experience not just with dealing with the mental health problems associated with losing friends and all the other struggles that you probably have going on in life. At what point do you realize, like, I'm not supported maybe the way I need to be? And like that firsthand experience, like, can you walk us through being a male athlete, going through mental health struggles, and then also the support side of it? What ultimately opened your eyes to the fact that there is a stigma and that, like, this is more dangerous for yourself than what it out to be?
Yeah, I think just being being able to read people and read my teammates, that really allowed me to even see struggles within myself. Specifically in college, I know a lot of my teammates were heavy drinkers, and those heavy drinkers had problems, and they had problems nobody had ever heard about. They had never talked to anybody about it. So suddenly I said to one of them, I was like, hey, are you all right? And he broke down, completely cried in the middle of a party. I took him to the back room, and I was like, let's talk about this. Like, I don't want to sit here and have you drunk and have drunk words and stuff like that, but this is drunk drunk words are truthful thoughts, right? That's what people say, but it shouldn't take getting to that point to be able to, for somebody to open up like that. And then I just kept realizing that this is not just one person, this is not just me, this is not just that one athlete that I had talked to, this is everybody. Like, all men are struggling with it, and whether you're an athlete or not, there's so many stigmas surrounding men being able to open up, because you're looked at as weak, you're looked at as lesser of a man because you're in contact with your emotions. Like, that should be a proud thing that you can talk about. Just wearing my heart on my sleeve, I think, is one of my superpowers in this world. I am who I am, and I'm proud of that. People need to start taking that into full effect of just, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to be you.
Talk a little bit more about, you said wearing your heart on your sleeve. Like, what does that look like for you? What does that look like for? Yeah.
It's how I'm dressed. I told you before you started, fashion is expression. I tweeted something today, like, give people a reason to stare at you. If you're different, that's a good thing. I think we try and push each other into these simplified lanes and just uniformity. Like, that's not the way the world works. It's not how it's supposed to work. If you stand out, that's a good thing. If you have a different opinion than others, that's great. I think we've become so divided to a point where it's like you either have to be this side or you have to be that side. And not even politics, everything.
And when were you able to do that? Like, have you always been that comfortable? Did it only come after you've kind of like worked on yourself and your mental health and kind of gone through it all? Like, how have you been able to get to that place where really it sounds like you really don't give a shit what people think? You're going to be you? Because I know for myself, like, I'm getting there and I've gotten there, but it's taken a lot of hard work. I certainly was very much, so worried about, oh, this person's going to think I'm this or that.
Right. I graduated last year. I'm 23. I don't know if there's a specific moment that I was just like, F it, like, I'm me. I would just say it's been a gradual increase. Like, I truly believe that I have found my purpose, and I think that purpose has laid the foundation of who I am and why I'm here. But I'm also just realizing in this world, like, I look at myself in the most honest yet truthful way. Like, I want to look at myself as special and see not only my flaws, because I am a flawed individual for sure, but seeing my superpowers, as I talked about, as that. I want to be helpful to the point where my truth within myself, my own self-empowerment, can also inspire others. So to be able to inspire myself is step one, to now go out and inspire more.
And you're having these conversations with men, right? With, the first example at the party with the one guy who broke down, but you mentioned having multiple of these conversations since, and I want to give our audience an opportunity to nod their head and relate, in a sense, other men perhaps. And so generally speaking, what are some examples of the problems that men are struggling with that we don't see often enough, but if spoken out on a microphone here, people can relate to?
Yeah, I think anxiety, depression. I've seen a lot of men with PTSD from their childhood traumas that they haven't even acknowledged themselves, but it's intrinsically built who they are. Whether they were put into a box metaphorically as a young kid to act a certain way or not act a certain way, to fit into a certain sexuality that you may or may not be. Like, those are social constructs that obviously parents put them upon their children. But even in the sense of anxiety, I think a lot of people, we all have anxiety, right? Like, nervousness, all this stuff. Before games specifically, I would see a lot of my teammates have that anxiety, but we all have it. But it takes a certain man to be able to acknowledge it and to treat it and act accordingly. But I would say that the biggest, I don't want to call it a symptom because it's not a sickness, but depression is it's a stigma. There's so much stigma around it that it's, if you're, it's a gradual increase. It could be 10 days, it could be 10 months, but people don't recognize what depression looks like until you're in it. It's a club you can only get in if you've been in it.
Yeah, and so can you talk, because I think you had mentioned you experienced bouts of depression during your kind of darkest days. Just talk through what you were feeling, what your days looked like. Just kind of talk through that experience a little bit.
Yeah, I felt like I was living my days in a cloud. A dark cloud was just over my head at all times. Each day felt like the same. I was doing the same thing every single day. I was waking up, going to school. Even if it was sunny out, I still felt like it was raining. Lack of purpose, lack of motivation, lack of social connectivity. I was just isolated. I would go to school, act happy. You would smile. That was the problem. That's the problem that a lot of men don't realize. You can smile. You can act funny. You can be the class clown and have a conversation like normal people would. But behind closed doors, as soon as you go home, I was just by myself. I felt like I had nobody. I knew I had a lot of friends. I was on the basketball team, won 2 state championships in high school, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there going home after we won, and I'm like, this sucks. And at the highest of my highs of just winning a state championship, I went home and I was like, yeah, no, something's not right.
Were there points in time where depression was disguising itself as maybe part of your identity and you would convince yourself otherwise? For example, my social connectivity is not optimal. Maybe I'm just introverted, right? Yeah. Did you start to let it kind of infringe on how you started to perceive your own identity? Were there moments where you maybe were lying to yourself a little bit but not realizing it?
Yeah, I think especially as an athlete, I would say my senior year of high school, so junior year we won a state championship, and having those expectations set for senior year, it was a big leap for us to be able to make. So senior year, candidly, I played like shit. First 10 games, junior year I led the state in 3-pointers.
Is that subjective or objective?
Yeah, subjective. Yeah, the first 10 games of senior year I did not make a 3. And I looked at myself and I was like, what's wrong with you? But in that gap between junior year and senior year starting, I had lost my friend to suicide. And that's what really made even the whole concept real to me, because I had those same thoughts. I had put myself in that position. I was like, that very easily could have been me.
Did you have any idea that he was struggling?
No.
Yeah.
It still kills me to this day. Yeah, I put myself in his shoes a lot of times. And to look into the crowd and not see him, I still think about it. But it had such an effect on my life where those first 10 games when I wasn't myself, I wasn't shooting like me, my coach was like, are you all right? What's wrong with you? Seriously, I will never forget. He looked at me and said, what's wrong with you? And it was in a not nice way, but it allowed me to look inward and be like, yeah, you're not yourself. You're not normal Teddy the way you should be. And that was the first time I had ever realized, yeah, you need help.
I want to go back to something you mentioned, PTSD, the word trauma. I think when we open up mental health discussions, the word trauma itself is starting to be a frequent term that's used, and one of maybe the barriers to opening up these conversations or encouraging more awareness around mental health is, people will distract and start to attack that word and say, come on, really? You're going to call a childhood event trauma? Meanwhile, trauma, PTSD, we might think a soldier in a trench in warfare, and there's this measurement or magnitude of trauma, right? And so how do you help explain to people that, sure, yeah, we're maybe throwing this word around a little bit, but maybe there's another word for it, or maybe it is an accurate word for it, and just how do you help make sense to our audience around when we talk about mental health, it doesn't take much for us
Right.
to uncover and diagnose something as a trauma.
It's relative.
Yes.
Yeah, the fact that it's relative, but also like we're using the same word to describe something on such a long spectrum or
Yeah.
massive scale. Well, how do we make sense of the fact that trauma is relative?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a large scope within the entire conversation, but at the same time, like you had said, it's relevant. It really is relevant, and even in terms of going about dealing with your mental health, right? Like what may work for you may not work for me, and same thing with you. Like everything, again, it's relevant, but I think trauma specifically. Who am I to tell you? Excuse me. Who am I to tell you that your trauma is not traumatic? And I think that's part of our problem in society in general. That we try and make amends with other people's problems when it's not our problems that we're dealing with. And it's if you are going through a traumatic experience and you have had your own past experiences, I can't sit here from a meta perspective and be like, yeah, no, that's not a traumatic experience. Meanwhile, that could have been the life-changing experience in your life. And I just think having that empathy, the emotional intelligence that we lack as a society it's alarming. It really is alarming to be able to look deeper than the initial questions of how are you doing or why are you that way? Why are you acting that way? Because everything it's a buildup. Like who we are today sitting in this room, it's a constant buildup from 28 years, you said?
28.
23 years? How old are you?
28.
28. You know what I mean? But like those past 28 years, you've now gone through X, Y, and Z to be able to get to this point. You've had your traumatic experiences, learned from them, and overcame them. But for somebody who was not able to do that, you would have never known it was a traumatic experience.
So what if you, let's say you've got a person, like for the audience, that they're not doing well and you want them to open up, but they don't want to, they don't feel comfortable, whatever. Like what have you found is most effective in terms of getting people to feel like it's a safe space, to get them to be vulnerable, to get them to open up?
Yeah, I think it's just, I always say bring the conversation down to their level of understanding, their level of emotionality, all of it. Like you have to be able to read them deeper than what they're perceiving. And obviously it takes the right person to be able to bring that out of somebody. I think therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, those are some of the most important people in this world. And there's a mass shortage of those kinds of people because they're put on this earth to help. And to be able to get that sort of information or get deeper than the initial questions, I think is a skill. And not a lot of people have it. But in a normal sense of a conversation, I think just looking beyond the facade that people put up, I think being able to make direct eye contact is a huge, huge step to start with. Eye contact is huge, and I say the eyes say a lot. It's this quote from Scarface, but the eyes say everything. Seriously though, it really does ring true because you can tell if you truly are an empath, you can tell through the eyes if somebody's sad or if somebody's dealing with something deeper than what they're perceiving. But at the same time, just being able to look at somebody and say, hey, are you alright? And I think having past knowledge and being able to know someone deeper than just one experience, I think definitely helps. But it's those deeper questions
The other thing that helped with me is kind of leading with vulnerability myself, and it doesn't have to be extremely vulnerable, but just like, hey, how are you doing? Like I'm struggling with this lately. Like, right. It's something that encourages them that they're not alone.
Absolutely. And it's trust. It's building trust. I think
trust.
If I came to you knowing that I trust you, you would be a lot more willing to share with me. But
there's just so many people where they're like, how are you doing? I'm good. And I'll say that more times than not, and then my mind will jump straight to all the reasons where maybe that's just too vague of an answer, right. But there are a select few people where if they ask me how am I doing, my answer's a little bit longer these days, And,
absolutely.
And I think that's to Kobe's point, is like you have certain relationships like that with those people. And I'm curious, what impact have you noticed in your own leadership? Because it sounds like that you've kind of taken a step forward for the sake of your social network. What kind of impact, whether it's the not-for-profit, whether it's just the conversations you've been having, like what sort of positive impact have you noticed that you've made on your immediate circle? Have you made friends? Have you gone deeper into certain relationships? Have you had to lose friends in the process who maybe just haven't understood? What kind of impact have you seen that you've made?
I think firstly, going back to what your point was about asking how you are. I think that's become a greeting. Like you walk past people, even in the hallway, it was always like, "Oh, how you doing? See ya." And you just walk past people. It's like, did you actually find out how he was doing? Like, you might as well have just said hello. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like that's where it's come to. It's like, how are you doing? I didn't even hear the answer, so I don't know how you're doing.
Even if they did say good, did you really hear it?
Right,
That's not an answer.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Good. Okay.
it's a greeting.
Are you actually
so true.
good? So little things like that I've picked up on and noticed that I've now been able to use in my talks and my leadership committees, stuff like that, where again, it's not something normal that people pick out. It's like it's become so ingrained in our society and the way we live. Like it's too normal. So having little things like that I can speak on. I used a metaphor in one of my speaking opportunities recently where it was like, if as a man, if you have a car full of groceries, you're not taking 2 trips. You're taking 1 trip and trying to carry as many grocery bags as you can. But that's just how we're built. That's how we've been molded.
I saw that. I like that one. Yeah. I saw you post. Yeah.
It's just like being so overwhelmed. We put too much on our plate. So it's a learning process. Again, this is my first full year of actually running it. But to be able to have a team around me and be able to lead them and be the captain of the team, it's been my proudest moment to date. But just being able to see them, learn from them, build that trust with them so that in a personal sense, screw business, at the end of the day, we're all human beings. So if I can look at my team and truly have that level of trust and understanding between us where they can say to me, obviously we're running a mental health organization, so if you can't speak to me or if you can't have those vulnerable conversations, there's a problem. Fire me as CEO. I want you to be able to look at me and say, Teddy, I'm struggling with this today because of X, Y, and Z. That's how my organization that's how I want it to be built. And there's a problem if it's not built that way. But I would say the biggest part is just having that, trust. It's being able to understand people and read things from their level. I'm working with people from across the country now. My researcher's in LA and she's okay, but she just got hit by a car. So just taking that one extra step and being like, okay, well, as the CEO, the head, I'm going to send her flowers today. I'm going to check in today, tomorrow, and the next day to make sure that she's okay. Because it's not about business. It's not about the research that she wasn't able to hand in on the deadline. I don't care. Are you okay as an individual? That's the thing people lose a lot.
What's been your motivation for all of this? Because a lot of people can learn and go to therapy and be somewhat fascinated by the idea of mental health, but what has ultimately sparked your flame internally to go and, wear the jacket and make a business out of this and be so intentional about it? It sounds like you're waking up every morning with like, how can I care from somebody now? How can I continue to break a barrier down? Like, something is driving you to do that, whether it's life purpose of like the evolution of your purpose or just what is motivating you.
I think as much as this is built to help people and built on helping people, it's helping me. It's a soul journey as much as it is anything else, and it truly is my purpose, and I believe that I found that. But I wake up every day and I'm happy because I know that I have that purpose. I now have a reason to keep going. I now have a reason and people with me along that journey to be like, yeah. It's all riding on me, so there's that pressure, there's that internal fire that's like, get your shit together, Teddy. Like, you got people relying on you. And that's overwhelming sometimes too. Because I have found burnout in that. But I would say my biggest motivating factor is the fact that it's a soul journey. It really is waking up every day and saying, you have bigger things to worry about than my therapist and business coach said to me the other day. Treat the things that are fires like fires. If it's not a fire, don't treat it as such. And that's kind of just changed and switched my narrative a little bit on that. Because I'm a perfectionist, so having things that don't get done freaks me out. It's anxiety, it's all of the above. It's just being able to get my eggs in a row. But I would say it's my proudest moment to sit here today and say that I am the CEO of a nonprofit organization, because coming from an entrepreneurship school, they don't teach nonprofits. And it's something I'm talking to the president about right now. Everything's about business, everything's about making money, everything's about who makes more money coming out of school. Like I don't care. I really don't care. Money is, you're not buried with it. You know what I mean? It's gone tomorrow, if it could be. But those lasting relationships, those people that you can have an impact on, that's the biggest thing that I strive for. I want to affect, and it goes hand in hand. Business and being able to raise the capital in a business sense goes with helping people. In a nonprofit, the more donations
Grants,
you get, grants, it all goes hand in hand. So to be able to scale this nationwide is a challenge, but it's a challenge I am so looking forward to growing in with.
Yeah, well, I wanted to say, man, I'm proud of you. You said you were proud of sitting here and be able to say you did a nonprofit. I got proud, and I barely know you, but that's
Thank
just
you.
it's truly inspiring, especially at 23 years old, to be able to, one, realize your purpose, and then two, act on it and scale it. It's very admirable. So I feel honored to sit next to you here today. But I want to talk a little bit about like just what did mental health look like in the locker room? You know, like as an athlete, because you have a focus, your organization, on athletes. And I know for myself personally, like we talked about this a little bit when we caught up before this, of how being an athlete for myself, I think often it forced me to repress a lot of like who I really was because of how I'd be perceived in the locker room. So maybe just talk about like what does mental health look like in a locker room for men specifically, of course. What did it look like in yours? What do you hear? Because you work with a lot of athletes.
Coaches too.
Mm-hmm. Anger is the first word that comes to mind. I think loss, win, didn't matter. I had a couple teammates break lockers, punch lockers. It's just not being able to control the things that you're feeling. And obviously losses, season-ending losses grow into that. But you breaking a locker or you lashing out at a teammate, that's not just from a game.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are predisposition of maybe years. Like you said, the traumatic experiences, that's built up for years. All of a sudden they reach a breaking point because of basketball or because of baseball. That just allowed it to be seen and become public. But I always say, if a teammate's lashing out on you, ask him if he's okay. Because nobody does. Everybody gets defensive, and it's like, okay, well, he's lashing out at me. Oh, screw him. I don't want to talk to him anymore. First of all, that's your teammate. Second of all, it's supposed to be a brotherhood. But that kid is probably struggling more than you even know. I found out one of my teammates he's an incredible, incredible man. But he was angry for a while. And I found out, like, just getting to know him, taking him out to lunch, and then eventually living with him. His mom was struggling with cancer. So to be able to see it from his perspective and take that extra step, and that's what I keep saying, like take that step to be able to find out more, because those lashing outs, those breaking of the lockers, like it's not just because of basketball. Like basketball is so much more than a game. But the guys in those locker rooms are struggling with so much more beyond those four walls. It's supposed to be a sacred and safe place within those four walls, but sometimes the shit that's outside, it gets brought in and it becomes ugly.
Did he ever explain why, like, that wasn't at a surface earlier? Like, why did it have to come to an episode for you to then take him out to lunch and ask, and like why he maybe hid that part of his life? Or if he didn't share why, can you maybe hypothesize around that?
Yeah, I think, and there were a multitude of examples that I've seen, especially in locker rooms, not just him himself. But for him as an example, it was definitely the way he was brought up. Knowing his parents, knowing that they're great people, but they're stern, strict, and kind of just set in their own ways. They don't really. He never really had the opportunity to do much else other than basketball, and he was great. So don't get me wrong, he was a hell of a player, but that was it. There was no identity away from the game, and I think a lot of athletes fall into that problem of only being, like I was, for 20-something years of my life, I said, yes, I'm Teddy Sourlis and I am a basketball player. And I think a lot of athletes have that, where it's only, I'm a track star, I'm a baseball player, but there's so much more to you that you may not even be able to have the opportunity to go find out.
And that's not even oftentimes the athlete's fault.
Right.
It's because you only get approval as a child, or you only get approval from the outside when you play well, when you do the good things.
Exactly.
So it's like that's so much of his identity that, like, having a mother going through cancer, it's like, well, this has nothing to do with me as a basketball player, so it just has nothing to do with me. But in reality, like, how can it not? And you're
Right.
playing basketball every day, like, that's that you're carrying all of that with you.
Right.
But you can't show that, or at least feel you don't have the space to show that, because it doesn't fit into that very, like, narrow, precise identity, which is a basketball player. And like it's really helpful for people, I think, to understand, is like, regardless of your profession and your expectation to perform, like, you are still a person, and your person and who you are and your identity and what you carry with you is way more holistic than the seat you're in or the arena you're in.
Yes, absolutely. Man in the arena. I told you, obviously his name is Theodore, but it's one of my favorite quotes ever. But it rings true, because specifically with athletes, I think they are glorified. I mean, obviously the higher you go, the professional levels, they're glorified, dehumanized, put on a pedestal to the point where, like imagine somebody coming into your office and just saying, hey, you fucking suck, like things like that, and it's like they're just screaming at you, yelling all this shit at you, and that doesn't happen. Like, these people are getting death threats online, on social media, because of a game. Like the Colorado State.
Yeah, that's what popped in my head. But you see what they did,
Yes.
which was awesome.
And kudos, credit to Dion. He, as much of a trailblazer as he has, and he ruffles some feathers for sure, but he is a good man at heart. But again, he's a human being, and he recognizes, first and foremost, those athletes, those football players he coaches. They're men. They're young men that he is now in charge of leading. And I think that's the most special part about what they're building in Colorado. But that's part of the problem with athletes. It's not, Kyrie talks about it all the time. We're not just athletes. We're not just a pawn in some game. They go home, they have conversations similar to this. They have men or women to go look at and talk to and be with. They have kids. And I think that human aspect really gets lost in it. It's almost sad to the point of, as a fan of sports, to where we've gone to. It's really upsetting.
Yeah, no, there's certainly a lack of empathy from a lot of sports fans.
And I think, like, coaches are playing probably a more critical role today than ever with
Absolutely.
the awareness of mental health out there. And like, what can coaches be doing better? Like, what's the current prototypical coach, right? We talk about the prototypical man and what they need to show themselves as. Like, what does a coach look like today? Maybe what does Dion bring, or like what do the more modern coaches need to look like in your perspective?
I think for me to sit here and say all coaches should look like Dion is a far-fetched statement, but he is so authentic to the point where, like, why would you not want to follow what he's saying? Why would you not want to listen?
Why would you want to go play for that guy?
Right. And there was he had a team meeting and he brought in every female staff member from the Colorado team. And he said, "Do you see these women right here?" And there were like 10 of them. He was like, "You better learn their names and you better hold the door for them. You better respect them every time you see them." And it just, as a football coach, you're like, obviously you're there to win games. They're doing great. But it's the values that he leads with that I think is incredible. To lead a team like that and switch the entire program around, it's based on values. It's based on who he is internally that he can now radiate to everybody else, and it's incredible to watch. But it truly is based on the values, and I'm grateful to be aligned with the Arthur Blank Foundation, which is the Atlanta Falcons, Atlanta United, because Arthur Blank had founded those. And he says, he has a great book, it's called Good Company. But he says the most important part of any organization, top to bottom, is the people that's within it. So I think leading with that motto, and even he has a business model where typically the CEO is at the top, the owner or whatever the case may be is at the top, and it forms into a triangle. He inverts that triangle and the CEO is at the bottom. And it's because in the level of importance, guest services members, the people who run the day-to-day in and outs of running the stadium, running the kitchen, all that stuff, those are the most important people, because you get to learn from the people, the guests or the customers that come into your stadium, because those are the people who have their ear to the ground. Those are the people who truly lead with values, and that's how it's replicated throughout his entire business, and it's incredible to watch. And I think that's those values, those core missions that you can now evoke on other people. It's incredible to watch and surround yourself with people like that.
Yeah, the culture he's created, Dion, is so evident. It just shines so clearly. And you've talked a lot about values. Like, what are your values? How have they evolved, if at all?
I don't know if they've evolved. I think I've been pretty true to myself. I would say putting people first is definitely number one. I was a huge Kobe fan. I am a huge Kobe fan. But I live my life every single morning. I wake up and I look at a poster that says Mamba mentality. And I don't know if that's a value, but that's a way of life. It's a way of life that I've based the past 10 years of my life on. Because it's just a mentality. It's just, I mean, yes, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to ask for help when you need it, but it's also a great thing to wake up and say, okay, well, even if I am struggling, if I get 1% better every single day, it's a hell of an achievement. And it was just a mindset switch for me. Not everything's going to be perfect. Not everything's going to go your way. You're going to lose. You're going to lose games. You're going to lose battles. You're going to lose a couple days. But in the grand scheme of things, if you can make yourself 1% better, I think that's really changed my entire life. And since Kobe's gone, I wake up grateful every morning.
Yeah, it's such a shame, man, because I didn't follow Kobe that closely. I followed him as a basketball player, but becoming more passionate about mental health, and I see a lot of like interviews he used to do. I mean, he was just such a wise individual. It was so much more than basketball for him.
Yeah.
And it's just a shame because you could just see him starting to blossom as a person. And like, I think he wrote a kid's book, but the speeches he gave just on accountability and overcoming self-doubt and the way he looked at failure. Like, I'm sure you've seen them all. Like, what are you, maybe just key takeaways like from Kobe and like what he's in his wisdom?
Yeah. I think he was certainly one of the biggest pioneers for athletes, specifically basketball players, and taking that "I am more than an athlete" mantra to a whole new level. Because right before he passed, he had just won an Oscar for his short film. And I think that was just a moving moment for not only his professional career, but just the entire professional leagues in general, because this man has 5 championships, 2 MVPs, finals MVPs, every accolade you could imagine. And he's going that extra mile to go expand his own personal bandwidth and win an Oscar. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Never been done before by an athlete. I think that was an inspiring message to me, because I was just like, okay, well, somebody as a creative myself, like I love photography, I love videography, directing my own short film by the end of the year. It just opened my mind to say, okay, well, even as an athlete, I can do this. I don't have to just, like we talked about, you don't have to put yourself into one box. You know what I mean? You can step out of that box and go explore different things and find out what you're interested in. You know, like James Harden and a couple athletes now, Dwayne Wade, they have wine companies and stuff like that, which I commend them. Like, congratulations, that's incredible. You should do that. If you're only a basketball player, that's limiting yourself to so much more. And I think Kobe definitely set the precedent for that.
Yeah, my favorite thing he said was just around, there's just a little quote around surrounding yourself with people that have purposeful energy.
Yes.
Because it's so evident, it's so clear when you are around those people, and it's so powerful and empowering for you, the individual. Yeah. When you're able to be around those people, it really brings out the best, at least it has for me. So I guess one more question for me is just like, what for you is just, what's the biggest challenge, maybe not only with your organization, but in terms of just spreading mental health awareness? It can be more broadly, it doesn't have to be specifically for men, it can be specific to men, but like what's the biggest challenge, what's the biggest roadblock right now?
I think, truthfully, candidly, I truly believe that mental health is one of the most important topics we could be having. But with that said, I don't want it to become a fad. I don't want it to become a quick trend, you know, something that can be quickly moved on from. Like, it's not just something that's, oh yeah, let's talk about this, let's set these standards in our school, or let's set this procedural process within school. It's like, well, are you actually helping kids? Are you actually, like, if a kid does come to you, what are you doing about it? I think it's almost become an out for some people, and like a crutch. And I think it obviously, and I'm not demeaning anybody's personal problems at all. But with that said, if you are struggling, you have to take the steps necessary to overcome that. And I think just sitting in your own self-pity and wallow like that, you can't sit and do nothing and expect to get better.
Right.
And I think that's something that Kobe taught me. If you truly want to help yourself, you want to help others, there are so many resources now to do so. And I think eventually that falls on you to be able to help yourself, you know, because at the end of the day... And
letting people help you. Like,
yes.
You have to open up in
Exactly.
order... Everyone wants to help other people,
Yes.
but you got to give people the opportunity to do that.
Right. And I say it all the time, I'm only one call away. I'm here if you need me. How many people actually call?
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's that mindset.
And that's genuine. Like, I can tell
Seriously.
from you, and I do that too, and it's like... It's frustrating. It's almost frustrating when you know there's people out there that could benefit.
Yes.
And you mean it from the bottom of your heart, like, I'm here, give me a ring.
Yeah.
And to your point, most don't.
Yes, exactly. And I told you, eye contact it's something that I've become really good at, but I will also say just reading people and reading the energy that people bring, the auras that they surround themselves with. It's probably my biggest skill set. And just, like you said, it's genuine. When I say, I'm not just saying shit to blow smoke. Like, if I'm saying I'm here for you, just call me, please just call me. I mean it. I mean it because I've lost people who I've said that to. I wish somebody had said it to me. But I also say it because I come from a place of knowing where you stand and seeing yourself from your position that I hope you can see yourself in. So if I know you're struggling, I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it again. Because I know what it looks like if somebody doesn't.
Teddy, we got 3 rapid fire questions to wrap this thing up. First of all, thank you for coming on here, for sharing your wisdom, your story, your authenticity. Just, it's all, I could feel the energy, and it's all very genuine. The first question is, what is just either the best piece of advice you've ever been given or your favorite quote?
I would say the best piece of advice is don't be afraid to make yourself known. And I think that also goes hand in hand with my favorite quote. Don't be afraid to make yourself known. And I think it was the way it was said, and the person who said it was so beautiful, because he's 80 years old and he is $8 billion of net worth.
And that's 80 years of wisdom.
Yeah. To even just be having a conversation with him was incredible, but he said, don't be afraid to make yourself known. And I think it's really how I live my life. It's how we started the conversation, like, not only with fashion, but just the way you enter the room. Like, you can own it. You have the ability to own the room every time you walk in, but it's on you. Again, your responsibility falls on you. You are what you make of it. And I think it's just a way of life, a perspective switch that people have the ability to do, but it's just about saying, screw everybody else, I don't care what people think, I'm gonna do me, I'm gonna be me. And I think there's so much light in being that authentic self. There should be no fear. There should be no fear. I think there's beauty in differences. And I think the more conversations we have like this, the more we can inspire other people to do the same.
Well, very well said. The second question is, if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Wow. It's funny you just asked that. My dad just asked me something similar to this. And my question, I have 3 idols in my world. 2 of them are no longer here. Virgil Abloh, Kobe Bryant, and Rihanna. I'm a huge Rihanna fan. I love Rihanna.
Was that one mental health related at all?
I met her a couple times, so the only
cool.
reason why she gave me the time of day, I mean, I called her Robin. I don't know if anybody knows this. Her real name is Robin. Robin Rihanna Fenty. So middle of New York, Robin. I didn't know it was her. From behind, Robin. And she turned and she said, only people who know me call me by Robin. And I just thought it was so cool because, again, going back to the point, like, these people are glorified and, like, dehumanized to the point where you don't even know her real name. Like, that's her first name. Her first name is Robin. So the reason she turned behind was because I called her by her first name. But yes, I would definitely take her out to dinner just to learn from her. I mean, the businesses now, my love for Rihanna started as a fandom. I was a young guy, I loved her, she's beautiful, whatever. But to now see the entrepreneur that she's created herself into and become a billionaire, her foundation, the makeup company that she has, Fenty Beauty, it was founded on diversity and inclusion because she was the first makeup line to come out with over 80 shades of makeup for every black female to be included within. It's never been done. She was the pioneer behind that entire thing, and I think there's so much beauty and so much to learn from that. Because it's probably 5 years going on now, but all the time before that, nobody's done that. I think that's a crazy thought, a crazy concept, but now that she's done it, it's set the standard for everybody else to follow suit. And I think that trailblazing mentality is something that I admire in all 3 of those.
And then lastly, just an easy one, but like, what do you like to do in your free time, hobbies?
I don't have much free time, and honestly, it's part of, the reason why I say that is because it's part of my own growing process. I have to find time to sit and do nothing. I think there's a lot more stuff I can do to make myself happy. My days are 12 hours, 8 a.m., 8 p.m. So hobbies are a problem. I would say photography. I love photography. And I love videography. So editing, all that stuff. It's something that, I don't know if it's free time, but it's become work also. So
yeah, I could use some tips. Maybe have a conversation after this. But anyway, no, thank you so much, Teddy. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Teddy.
Thank you for having me.